When I opened my door, my brother was standing there holding a leash that once belonged to my dead father's dog. 7 years had passed since I last saw Mark. 7 years since I blocked his number and swore I would never speak to him again. But there he stood on my doorstep in Denver, gaunt and nervous, with a golden retriever at his feet. The dog had the same scar across his left ear, the same white patch on his chest. My hands went cold. My throat closed up. Mark smiled that sad smile I remembered from childhood and said the words I never thought I would hear. He said, I brought him home. 7 years earlier, I stood in the driveway of our childhood house in Montana with 2 suitcases and a backpack. College was 4 hours away in Missoula. My dorm did not allow dogs. Mark promised he would take care of Scout. He was my older brother. I trusted him. Scout sat by the porch, tail wagging, watching me load the truck. I knelt down and scratched behind his ears. I will visit every weekend, I whispered. Dad would want you safe. Scout licked my face. Mark stood behind me with his arms crossed. He said, do not worry, sis. I got this. I believed him. I drove away and watched Scout in the rearview mirror until the house disappeared. It was finals week when I got the text. I was studying in the library when my phone buzzed. The message was short. Had to sell Scout. Rent was due. My hands started shaking. I read it 3 times. I called him. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. My roommate asked what was wrong. I could not speak. I just stared at the screen. He sold my dog. He sold Scout. The dog our father rescued from a burning house when I was 12. The dog that slept at the foot of my bed every night after Dad died. My roommate touched my shoulder. She said, he sold your dog? I nodded. I whispered, he sold family. I blocked his number that night. I packed my things the next morning. I did not cry. I just moved through the motions like a robot. My roommate asked if I wanted to talk. I said no. I finished my finals. I graduated. I moved to Denver and started working as a veterinary nurse at a trauma clinic. I built a quiet life. I worked double shifts. I adopted routines. I kept Scout's old leash in a drawer by my bed. Sometimes I opened it and stared at the worn leather. I remembered what Dad used to say when we were kids. You protect what cannot fight for itself. Mark broke that rule. I never forgave him. Years passed. I turned 27, then 30, then 34. I got promoted to ICU supervisor. I bought a small apartment near the clinic. I kept my life simple. No drama. No complications. Work was the only place betrayal could not follow me. I took care of animals that other people gave up on. I stitched wounds. I monitored heart rates. I saved what I could. My coworkers said I was good at staying calm under pressure. They did not know it was because I had already survived the worst kind of pain. The kind that comes from people you love. The kind that teaches you never to expect anything from anyone again. Then one winter evening, there was a knock at my door. I was not expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and froze. Mark stood there looking thinner than I remembered. His face was pale. His eyes were tired. But he was smiling that nervous smile. And at his feet was a golden retriever. My heart stopped. I opened the door slowly. The dog looked up at me with brown eyes. He had the same scar on his ear. The same build. But something felt wrong. The collar was new. The tag was different. Mark said, he has been through a lot. I did not answer. I just stared. The dog licked my hand. Mark said he was clean now. Sober. Running a rescue network. He said he found Scout in a shelter upstate. He said he had been looking for 7 years. Every shelter. Every rescue. Every listing. He wanted to make things right. He wanted forgiveness. I stood there in the doorway and felt nothing. No anger. No relief. Just cold calculation. I said, you tracked him down? Mark nodded. He said, every day for 7 years, Elena. I swear. I let him inside. The dog sniffed around my apartment like he belonged there. I made coffee. Mark talked about rehab and second chances. I listened. I did not trust a single word. The next morning, I brought the dog to my clinic. I told my coworker I needed to scan his microchip. She asked if everything was okay. I said yes. The scanner beeped. I read the screen. The chip was registered to a name I did not recognize. A different address. A different state. The breed listed was Labrador mix, not Golden Retriever. My stomach dropped. This was not Scout. But someone had changed the registration recently. Someone had falsified the records. I printed the report and folded it into my pocket. I did not say anything to Mark. I just smiled and told him the dog looked healthy. I needed time to think. I backed up footage from the clinic security cameras. I downloaded old adoption papers from when I first registered Scout 7 years ago. I contacted my friend Delaney who worked at the USDA Animal Welfare Division. I kept my voice calm and professional. I said, I think someone is falsifying rescue records. She asked if I had proof. I said, not yet. But I will. She told me to document everything. I spent the next 3 days gathering evidence. I did not confront Mark. I just let him visit my apartment. I let him talk about the rescue network. I let him think I believed him. I was patient. I had learned patience from years of loss. Mark started visiting every other day to see the dog. He brought treats. He talked about how good it felt to do the right thing. But one afternoon, he slipped. He was telling a story about another rescue and he said, the buyers loved him. I paused. I said, buyers? He blinked. He corrected himself. He said, adopters. I mean adopters. But I saw it. The crack in his story. This was not about guilt. This was not about redemption. This was business. He was moving dogs through fake paperwork. He was selling them. And he thought I was stupid enough not to notice. I smiled and nodded. I asked if he wanted more coffee. While Mark was in the bathroom, I went through his duffel bag. I found a USB drive tucked into a side pocket. I copied the files onto my laptop in under 2 minutes. When he came back, I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone. He never suspected. That night, I opened the drive. It was full of scanned adoption forms. Same vet signature on all of them. Same notary stamp. My name was forged on several documents. Dogs listed as adopted to families in Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming. I cross-referenced the names with state records. Every single one traced back to one rescue organization. Mountain Hearts Animal Recovery. Mark was the founder. I ran the data for hours. Every adopter tied to the same address. Every transaction processed through the same PayPal account. Mark had built an entire network. He was not just flipping 1 or 2 dogs. He was trafficking dozens. Purebreds. Puppies. Dogs with pedigrees. He stole them or bought them cheap from desperate owners, then resold them with fake vet clearances and forged adoption papers. My name was used to legitimize the transactions. He had been using me for months, maybe years. I stared at the screen and felt something sharp and cold settle in my chest. I did not cry. I just wrote everything down. Then I emailed it all to Delaney. I made a choice that night. I could confront Mark. I could scream and throw him out and cut him off forever. Or I could finish this the right way. I could make sure he faced real consequences. I thought about Scout. The real Scout. The one Dad saved. The one Mark sold for rent money 7 years ago. I thought about all the other dogs Mark had stolen and sold. All the families he lied to. I chose justice. I emailed Delaney again. I said, I am ready to help. She called me an hour later. She said, we have been investigating Mountain Hearts for 6 months. You just gave us everything we needed. They wired my phone. Delaney walked me through the process. Small microphone. Hidden recorder. I was nervous but I did not show it. Mark came over the next afternoon. He asked if I could help with vet clearances for a few dogs. He said it was just paperwork. Quick signatures. Nothing complicated. I played along. I said, sure. What do you need? He pulled out a folder. 3 dogs. All purebreds. He said the adopters were waiting. I signed the forms while the recorder captured every word. He bragged about how easy it was. How nobody checked the details. How he made thousands flipping dogs every month. I smiled and handed him the papers. My hand did not shake. 2 days later, a rescue volunteer walked into my clinic with a golden retriever. She said he needed a medical clearance before adoption. I scanned his chip. My screen froze. It was Scout. The real Scout. Same registration number. Same birth date. Same everything. I stared at him. He looked older. Thinner. But his eyes were the same. I knelt down and he licked my face just like he did 7 years ago. The volunteer said he had been passed between 3 shelters in 2 years. I asked where she got him. She said Mountain Hearts Animal Recovery. My chest tightened. Mark had been trafficking Scout this whole time. He never sold him once. He sold him over and over. I called Delaney immediately. I said, I found him. I found Scout. She asked if I was sure. I said yes. She told me to bring him home and wait for her call. That night, Scout slept at the foot of my bed like he used to. I cried for the first time in 7 years. Not because I was sad. Because I was done being patient. Delaney called the next morning. She said, we are moving in. We need you to set up one more meeting with your brother. I said, when? She said, tomorrow. I agreed. I texted Mark. I said I had more paperwork for him. He replied within seconds. Said he would meet me at the storage lot outside Bozeman. I knew what was coming. I was ready. The next afternoon, I drove to the storage lot. Delaney and her team were hidden in unmarked vehicles. I wore a wire under my jacket. Mark arrived 10 minutes late. He smiled and waved. He looked relaxed. Confident. He handed me a folder with 6 adoption forms. I flipped through them slowly. All fake. All signed with my forged signature. I said, this is a lot of dogs. He shrugged. He said, business is good. Then a woman pulled up in a white van. Mark waved her over. She opened the back. Inside were cages stacked with dogs. Some were sedated. Some were whimpering. My stomach turned. Mark said, this is my partner, Vanessa. She handles transport. I nodded. I memorized her face. I heard the sirens before I saw the lights. Federal agents swarmed the lot. Delaney shouted commands. Officers surrounded the van. Mark turned to me, eyes wide. He said my name like a question. Like he could not believe what was happening. I stood still. I did not move. I did not speak. Officers cuffed him. They cuffed Vanessa. They opened every cage in the van. 43 dogs. Some stolen. Some bought illegally. All part of Mark's network. Delaney walked over to me. She said, you did good. I watched them load Mark into the back of a squad car. He stared at me through the window. I whispered to myself, you sold my dog. Then I turned and walked away. Mark was arrested alongside Vanessa and 2 other accomplices. The news broke that night. Local stations ran the story. Federal agents bust animal trafficking ring. Mountain Hearts Rescue exposed as fraud. My clinic fielded dozens of calls. Reporters wanted interviews. I refused all of them. I cooperated with investigators. I gave statements. I handed over documents. But I did not speak publicly. I did not rant on social media. I just did my job. Delaney told me the case was airtight. She said Mark was looking at serious time. I nodded. I felt no satisfaction. No triumph. Just clarity. Justice did not feel loud. It felt finished. 3 weeks later, Mark requested a visit at county jail. I almost said no. But I wanted to see him one last time. I wanted him to see what he lost. I drove to the facility and signed in. They brought him out in an orange jumpsuit. He looked smaller. Older. He sat down across from me. He said, I just wanted to make things right. I stared at him. I said, then start by telling the truth. He looked away. He said, I messed up. I said, you did not mess up. You built a business on stolen lives. He opened his mouth to argue. I stood up. I said, I am done. I walked out before he could say another word. The trial happened in early spring. I sat in the back of the courtroom and watched everything unfold. The prosecution laid out the evidence. Forged documents. Bank transfers. Emails between Mark and his accomplices. Video footage from the storage lot. I was called to testify. I walked to the stand and told the truth. I explained how Mark used my name without permission. How he falsified vet records. How he trafficked Scout and dozens of other animals for profit. Mark sat at the defense table and stared at his hands. He never looked at me. Not once. The judge asked if I had anything else to add. I said no. I stepped down. I felt nothing. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found Mark guilty on all counts. Fraud. Animal trafficking. Forgery. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. I did not attend. Delaney called me with the results. 6 years in federal prison. Vanessa got 4. The other accomplices took plea deals. Delaney said it was a strong sentence. She said it would send a message. I thanked her. I hung up. I sat in my apartment with Scout curled up at my feet. I did not feel relief. I did not feel vindication. I just felt tired. Like I had been holding my breath for 7 years and finally let it out. Justice was not loud. It was just over. I sold my apartment in Denver 3 months later. I moved back to Montana. Back to the house where I grew up. It had been sitting empty since Dad died. I spent the summer fixing it up. New paint. New floors. I restored the porch where Scout used to wait for me. I planted flowers in the front yard. I bought a truck. I adopted 2 more dogs from a legitimate rescue. I started working at a rural clinic 20 minutes away. Life became quiet again. But this time, it was a different kind of quiet. Not the kind that came from running away. The kind that came from being home. Scout adjusted quickly. He remembered the house. He remembered the field behind the property where Dad used to take him running. I clipped the same old leash to his collar one morning and we walked out to the edge of the trees. He ran ahead, tail wagging, just like he did when I was a kid. I stood there and watched him. The sun was rising over the mountains. The air smelled like pine and cold water. I thought about Mark. I thought about the 7 years I spent angry and alone. I thought about the moment I opened my door and saw him standing there with a leash. I did not regret what I did. I would do it again. People asked me later if I forgave him. Reporters. Co-workers. Friends. I never answered. Forgiveness was not something I thought about. Forgiveness was for people who wanted peace with the past. I did not need peace. I needed closure. And closure came the day I watched officers cuff my brother outside the same house where Scout once waited for me to come home. It came the day I testified in court and told the truth. It came the day I drove back to Montana with Scout in the passenger seat and realized I did not have to run anymore. Forgiveness is peace. But justice is closure. Scout is home now. And so am I.